Make up your mind, geez. Okay, so can you guys see this whiteboard?
Yeah.
Kinda, huh? Okay. So we're talking about building performance, right? And I just thought of another way to think about it. And that is there's four things, and then there's a million ways you can look at this. Okay, so this is just something I thought of. It's not, something you really need to memorize, but four things you want to keep out of your house. Yeah? Okay. One is hot air, and I don't just mean warm, cozy air. I mean hot, so it's stifling. You want to keep cold air out, right? You don't want to freeze. And you want to keep, if the air outside is bad, you live in a place where the air quality is bad, like right now Visalia is one of those places, LA probably in general, whether it's smog or, you live next to a dairy farm, you know how those smell, you've driven by those. Or the air is just polluted or whatever, you want to keep it out of your house. So that's another thing you want to keep out. And you want to keep inside air that's affected by toxins on the inside, you want to get that out too. So I think those are the four main things you want to keep out. And then there's
Patrick, there's a bit of glare on the board. What does 3 and 4 say?
Oh, I can fix that.
That's better, thanks.
Bad outside air, bad inside air. My writing's part of it too. And then there's two things you want to keep inside. One is enough fresh air so you can breathe. You need that, right? And you want to keep heating and cooling money from disappearing. Now we could add some global warming aspect, but we're not going to right now. We'll just think about it as comfort and health. So a lot of places are too hot in the summer, and if you don't have proper insulation, possibly a air barrier on the outside, that hot air is going to try to move in, because hot air and hot water always go to cold air or cold water, right? Hot always goes to cold. So
Patrick, I'm going to switch to an iPad. I'm going to log in like 2 seconds.
okay. And then if cold air, on the other hand, goes to hot air, right? So, I mean, hot air goes to cold air. And so if the air is colder on the outside, then your inside air is gonna want to go to the outside. So hot always goes to colder. We know that much. And then we talked about pressure. Pressures in the house that can force air both ways. So we got to deal with those too, because they interact with the air. If you're trying to save it one way or another, you got to make sure the pressures are dealt with. So enough fresh air means if you do something to keep some of these things on the top out, your house may be too tight, you're not giving enough fresh air. A, legally, you have to have a certain amount of fresh air, and B, you want to follow that because, you know, it's healthier to have fresh air. And then if your house is leaky, you're going to be losing money that you're heating and cooling the air with. So it's just another way of looking at, you know, the things you want to keep and the things you want to get rid of in your house in terms of the air, temperature and air. Okay, that's pretty straightforward, yeah? Does everybody have that? You want me to leave that for another minute or? If I were to ask that on a test, I don't know yet if I'm going to ask on the midterm or the final, but if I were to ask that on a test, I wouldn't just put it like 4 things you want to keep in your house. That's too vague. I would narrow it down and say, you know, why do you condition the air in a house? To keep it cold if it's too hot, keep it warm if it's too cold. You know, I would separate it into things like that. And before I put that on a test, I'll go through the test, the midterm, and I'll tell you the week before what's going to be on it. So I may not even have a question. So don't worry about it. Won't be, this is a shorthand anyway. It won't be like, I won't ask you something like that directly. Okay. So does everybody have that copied down?
Yeah, Patrick,
Yes.
in relation to testing, I was reading this week's materials, and there's some calculations on there for the CFM and ACH. Are you going to have any of that on the test?
No, I don't think calculations, but I've got other, we're going to do a unit on ventilation, and I'll look on the Canvas and see when it's coming up. Might be next, might be a couple away. That we're going to go through the math, and if I have any on a test, it'll be very simplified because those calculations are they're going to be simple for some of us, and they're going to be harder for others of us, depending on our math ability. And what's interesting is the state has tried to make it simpler, so they don't even have you do calculations anymore. They found it was too hard for contractors to do, so they just tell you what size fan to buy. If you're going to use an exhaust fan, you know, as a whole house fan, they just tell you what size to get by the size of your house, and they have a little chart on how to figure it. So it's much simpler. But we'll get into that later. Okay, let's see what we got here. Okay, this was in homework a while back. I'm just going to go over something. So don't panic if you don't remember this in last week's homework. This first chapter of this book that we're getting all this information from, it's pretty interesting. But let me find what I wanted. So, here's something that's interesting to know, even though I won't put it on a test. See this picture here? Can you see that okay? Can
Yeah.
everybody see this?
Yes.
Yeah.
So they list these 4 things over here, and then they have a picture. So you can put a thermometer in a room and you'll get what's called an ambient temperature. Ambient means what's generally in the air. It could be like 70 degrees, say. But then your walls may be putting out, they may be heated by the sun or, you know, whatever. They may actually be radiating more than 70. And I have at school, I have a little gun. You point a temperature gun, and it's infrared, and you point to the wall or the ceiling, and you can actually get the radiant temperature. And it rarely is the same as the ambient temperature. And, you know, the ambient temperature may be fine, like you're in the house looking at it with a realtor and he says, oh, what are you so upset about it being hot? The thermometer says it's only 75 degrees, but he'll be wrong because the radiant temperature may be making that room feel a lot hotter.
Is there an average? Is there a way to take the average? Is there like a combination?
No, I don't think. You just kind of have to know what each one is and deal with it. Now, what we've been doing with, well, we're going to talk about that today. If you live in the desert or someplace really hot and you don't have adequate insulation, that heat will make its way inside and create radiant heat that you don't need. So part of our dealing with the walls and the insulation and vapor barrier has to do with one of the things that creates radiant heat. Then there's air movement, and that can be from the pressures. Like if you have a lot of wind, say driving on this side, it pressurizes the house, and then usually the air leaves on the opposite side if there are any cracks here. So the air is kind of flowing through your house, and it's outside air, so it could be cold or hot or whatever. So wind will make a factor. And then warm air rises, we know that, and it could be heated by a stove or a fireplace or something, and that air will rise. It may go up to the next floor and make that hot. So there's all these interactions of pressures and air movement. And then the fourth thing, so air, ambient temperature, radiant temperature, air movement, or some of that is convection, some of that is pressure. Then the fourth thing is humidity, relative humidity. And that's just, that can be, say, like, bathrooms create a lot of humidity, showers, and people take long showers, and that humidity, if it goes into the house, creates a lot of relative humidity. Cooking creates a lot. You put, pot of water on for pasta, all that water boils, and the warm, humid air goes into the room. So relative humidity is another comfort. These are all kind of comfort factors. And humidity can get actually too high for health. So it's another thing. Sometimes people put a vapor barrier on the inside. We'll talk about this more in a second, vapor barriers, or a air vapor barrier. And that keeps the vapor barrier from leaving the room. So your humidity will really build up unless you have a fan, some
Or
kind
a
of
dehumidifier?
Yeah, dehumidifier or some kind of fan that can whisk that outside. So we're going to talk about, sealing. The topic is air sealing, but it's all connected. So I just wanted to make you aware of this. There's some other things. Let me just quickly go through this. The relative humidity. You have this handout. It was earlier in the course. Here's something about radiant temperature if you want to read it. Here's thermal flaws in building. We've talked a bit about that. We'll talk more about that today. Thermal boundary, that's kind of a, you can read about it. I think it gets confusing. They make too much of a thing out of it. Air leakage, we've talked about this, the places where air leaks, and we'll talk a little bit more today about it. Driving forces for air leakage. We just talked about wind, and here's stack effect, and stack effect just means you've got something warm down below heating the air, and that hot air will rise. And it actually, in a two-story building, it creates actually a neutral pressure line in the middle of that second story. So there's a lot of things to think about. Air leakage and ventilation. We're going to talk about ventilation in a separate unit, and then air sealing is what we're talking about today. But one more thing I wanted to mention that we haven't mentioned, and that's, the last couple of weeks, or maybe even from the beginning, we've talked about insulation and stopping air leakage as two ways to keep the air conditioning in your house right. Is that right? That's a yes. That was a question, and the answer is yes. Everybody?
Yes.
Does everybody agree?
Yes.
Great. Okay. So, but I forgot there's actually a couple other. Can you guys see me?
Yeah.
Darn, I can't see you. It's unfair. There's two other mitigating factors for comfort and energy efficiency. And those are, can you guess from this unit right here, this subunit? Actually, there's three. I don't know where in the book we talk about it more, but one is shading, right? So instead of using the air conditioning to create all the cool air in the house, people for thousands of years have planted trees, and especially deciduous trees, which are leafed out in the summer. They protect the house with shade, right? So, I mean, that lowers the temperature incredibly when you have shade. So that's another thing you can do besides insulation and plugging the leaks. And then also reflectivity. You can have your roof be a lighter color, and they make roofs now with not only lighter colors, but with reflective particles in the roof so that the sun hits the roof and reflects back, doesn't absorb into the attic or the house below. So those are two things. And then the third one is passive solar heating, which we haven't talked about. And that is using windows to let sun in to heat your house passively without combusting anything, right?
Yeah. Hey, Patrick, speaking about the cooler temperature from painting your roof a lighter color, have you
Yeah.
seen this new white paint that they're developing?
And you
That-
just paint asphalt shingles with it?
Well, no, these scientists came up with this new white paint that's so white that it works the same as an air conditioner. So you don't need an air conditioner for your house. You just use this white paint.
It may be.
Kind of amazing.
We'll see. Yeah, that is pretty great. They have paints now that can go to shingles, but usually they just recommend reshingling and getting the shingles that are more reflective. And the bottom line, if you have to replace your shingles because they're just worn out and are starting to leak, the best thing you can do is get a light color shingle. You may have had a dark color originally because dark colors were more popular, but dark colors do look good. They look better than light colors often, but you have to sacrifice the aesthetics to contribute to your air conditioning. So light colors are the way to go, and light colors with reflective material. So
Patrick,
yeah, go
I've
ahead.
got a question on that. So regarding reflective material, is the angle of reflection ever such that it reflects into people's eyes, passerbys? Is it, or does it all point upward based on?
Oh, that's a
the
great
roof
question.
Geometry.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I don't know I haven't heard anything about that, so I don't have a definite answer, but I have a guess, and that is the reflection off of a roof like that is still going to be above the house line. It'd have to be even a really steep roof, like an A-frame roof. Well, that might reflect into people's eyes because the roof goes all the way down to the floor. But usually that one story of wall keeps the reflection above where you look.
So the height and the geometry.
Yeah, just because of the reflective geometry. Does anybody have any experience with any problems with that stuff? It's a great question because every new invention we have usually has some kind of problem that we don't discover till later. I'll see if I can find any discussion of that.
Patrick, I just put a
appreciate it.
link to that ultra white paint article
Oh,
in the
great.
chat if you want to check it out. It's pretty
Yeah,
cool.
great. Thank you. Perfect. I know they've been making paints and stuff, nothing quite as spectacular as what you are saying, but they've been working on that for a long time. And that's good, right? That's a real passive solution. Paint's really easy to put on and relatively cheap. So if that's, if you had light or reflective roofing material and the walls were painted with this reflective paint, Would that be great if we could do enough cooling for that?
As long
That's
as
gonna
you're
be-
okay with
yeah.
having a white house.
Yeah, the other thing is if you have, that works great in a place that's hot most of the year, which is, you know, a good part of the world, the whole tropic zone. But when it gets cold, that's not good because you want the walls to absorb the sun, right? But if the heat was worse than the cold, you know, you lived in a place where it got a little cold, but the heat was horrible, you would do it and then you could just do some kind of heating, you know, sustainable heating on top of that. There's every combination, right, to do that are sustainable. But these are really nice because they're passive things. You know, they don't need a lot of, you know, maintenance or they don't need electricity, which is a good thing. Okay, so, okay, I think that's it for that one. And let me go to, ta-ta-ta-ta. That one I'll go to, no. Okay. Oh, I just love screen sharing, you know? Can you see the screen?
Yep.
Can you see the screen still?
Yep.
Okay. So look, air sealing homes, that's the unit tonight. So this is what our text, if you had bought the text, would have in it. And this is general stuff that we've sort of been talking about. So I don't know how much we'll repeat it. Well, let's just look at what reducing air leakage accomplishes. Lots of times it's nice to repeat it from somebody different, like a book rather than a teacher. It'll sort of reconfirm, it'll sort of confirm things you've learned. Saves energy. Okay, we want that. By reducing air exchange, saves energy by protecting
Yeah,
the therm.
Are we supposed to be like seeing a page right now? Or no?
You
We can only see
guys,
the folder view.
Yeah,
you guys.
I thought you were just
How
explaining.
about before? Did you see any of those pages?
No, there's. Oh yeah, before we saw the pages, I thought, or yeah,
Oh, really?
yeah.
And you don't see this page?
No, I just see
No,
the
we're
little
stuck in
mini-
your folder view.
Okay. So that means what does that mean?
It means that you're only sharing one window and you wanted to be sharing your entire screen.
Yeah, so that means I got to take everything out of the folder.
No, no,
Which
no,
is-
no. It's fine. It's just a screen sharing setting. Basically, you were only giving us access to see the folder view when you were expecting to give us access.
Right,
to see the
but can I
dashboard.
change that?
Yeah, I believe that should be a feature with Zoom, not anything to do with your computer.
Okay, well, I don't have time to find it. Let's see. So I'll just put them out. One. God. It's funny because sometimes that works. It's the way I what do you call it? It's the way I scan them. My wife's scanner scans them all continuously. And if I do it singly, some of these are old folders that I did singly. So Okay. You can see it now, right?
We can.
Yes? Chapter 3, you can see that? Hello?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you. So saves energy by unintentional air exchange. Saves energy by protecting the thermal resistance. I don't know what that means. Increases comfort by reducing drafts. That's true. Reduces moisture migration into building cavities. Not necessarily. Reduce the pathways by which fire spreads to a building. I don't know, maybe. Now, can you see that 3.3?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. So we're going to look at the next set of things after this part of the book is some pages I got from one of the trainings I did 15 years ago. And but they're still pretty good. It has great pictures on specific sealing of things. But this right here is interesting. So here's an air sealing material on the outside. So it's not, so if it says air barriers must be able to resist severe wind pressures. I don't know what they're trying to say there. But down here it says caulking should be used only for small cracks. Anything larger than 1/4 of an inch takes a spray foam, right? Okay, we'll look more in those details. Now, air barrier materials, this is weird stuff. This is how old this is. You know, I looked at air barriers today before class, just as a topic on Google, and it's still really confused. So I'm not going to apprise you of the confusion. I'm going to just tell you what I think, okay? So these air barriers, we don't need to say this because the way we build now in California is we put sheathing on, true?
Yes.
So we usually, and we put the sheathing on, unless it's, well, stucco houses have sheathing too. We put the sheathing on more for structural reasons. So it acts as a wind barrier if wind's going to blow, I don't know how wind would get through stucco. But anyway, so we don't have to think about this as a wind barrier. And we have Tyvek on the outside, which is also a wind barrier. So the way we construct now already does this. Now, we usually don't have a barrier on the inside. And we'll talk about that. That's the big area of contention. But
I thought Tyvek allowed air movement so that you don't get moisture buildups behind siding and stuff.
well, they say, and was that Jack?
Yeah.
Maybe you can do a research project for this, Jack. I've looked at it for years. I've even looked into the chemistry trying to figure this out. They advertise to Tyvek people that vapor will go through, but air won't. But I don't know how that works, except that unless water molecules are so much smaller than air molecules.
I don't think that's true because isn't vapor, water, and air combined? So it's like bigger.
Well, that's what I'm thinking too. But I looked it up once, and the vapor's embedded in the air, right? It's not just, they're not just two separate things. There's air and moisture in that. So, and I don't know, the water is H2O, right?
Yeah.
For chemical, and the oxygen is O2. So there's two, and oxygen atoms are bigger than hydrogen atoms. So maybe an O2 is smaller. I mean, H2O is smaller than an O2. And so maybe it's the weave and the Tyvek lets the O2 through but doesn't let the H2O through. I don't know. It got beyond me at one point. I just gave up, but they say different things. I'm glad you caught that because when they advertise, they say different things about what it can do.
Yeah, because I
No.
thought it's supposed to stop water, but allows air to dry out the studs that may happen to get wet.
Yes, so that means that the moisture can pass through it. But what they say is bulk water, like rain, can't go through it.
Oh,
If
for
you-
sure. Yeah.
If you take a hose against it, it won't go through it. So,
Right.
but I think it's not an air barrier. They say it's an air barrier. They advertise as an air barrier, which is interesting. But let's see, here we go, house wrap. Vapor
They also
permeate-
don't they sell like a mesh product, like a 1/2-inch sheathing you put behind it?
Yeah, hold on, we'll look at that. So here, look on the second page, cross-link polyethylene house wrap. That's Tyvek. So it says house wrap is vapor permeable, so it lets the water out. That's what we want. It's waterproof, so rain can't go through it, and a good air barrier. So, see, everybody calls it an air barrier. I have my doubts, but doesn't seem to. Yeah. So, we'd have to ask a chemist who deals with vapor and air. Anybody know one of those? Yeah, nobody deals just in that. So we have, so we'll talk about plastic air barriers in a minute. But we have, for a place like Santa Barbara and mild climate places, God, you can't get any milder than Santa Barbara. They say that a drywall air barrier, which has a little bit of caulking in places where the drywall can be loose from the plates. They say a 1/2 inch, or now we have to do 5/8 drywall with a little bit of caulking is a great air barrier for this climate. And I would tend to go with that because if you use a polyethylene, not Tyvek, but a visqueen or plastic film. When I lived in Maine, that's what we did on the inside. Canada still does that everywhere because it's too damn cold in the winter and you don't want the moisture to get into your wall because it can't get out of the wall before the cold air that's coming from the outside hits it. And it hits it in the middle of the damn wall and then it condenses the water. And so the water and the vapor turns to actual water and drops on your insulation and your framing. So in most places, you really need an inside air barrier to keep the moisture from getting into the wall. But we don't have that problem here because it's not that cold. So, but if we wanted to make it the barrier a little stronger because we're trying to save energy, we don't want the heat or cool in the house, whatever we've conditioned, we don't want it to go out as fast. So you could put one of these kind of drywall caulking barriers, and that would be kind of the reason in cold climates, the reason you put visqueen, 10 mil visqueen, or anybody ever hear that name, visqueen?
My father-in-law used to say that all the time.
Yeah, exactly. The old guy said it's like bitchethane, they're not really words. Visqueen actually is a brand name, but it's like bitchethane. They're just kind of old words that people use. But anyway, it's
I
just
thought bitchethane was a word. I say that every day.
well, no, bitumen is a British way of saying bitumen. And there was a product originally that was made from that, and they called it bitchethane. It was an American product, and we just didn't want to go with the fine pronunciation, so we call everything bitchethane now. And no matter how you try to break that habit, it's here for good. So anyway, but the plastic, the 10 mil plastic, the stuff you can get on a roll at Home Depot, you got to have it fairly thick. Not so much as a barrier, but it'll tear easier if it's thinner, and you can't bear any tears in it. And what was I going to say about that? Oh yeah, that that not only keeps vapor out of the wall, but it also keeps the warm air from leaving the house. And that you're paying a lot of money to heat that air up, right? In a cold climate. You're spending a lot of heating costs. And so you don't want to waste that. So you're not really ever stopping the vapor or the heat. They can go through all that stuff, but it takes them a lot longer. So insulation, you don't stop heat in a wall. When it hits the insulation, it just slows down because it hits all those air pockets. And the slower it takes to get out, the less fast you have to heat it on the inside. So you're just slowing it down very much and you're saving energy, but you never totally, stop it. So let's see. I've never heard galvanized steel. I don't know what that's about. Foam board. So yeah, forget that. We've done that. Okay. No, we'll look at it. We'll look at things to plug cracks. I've got a better discussion of it. Okay, so major, you can all see this, right? 342. Yes. Okay, major air leak locations and treatments. They hardly even make knee walls. Although if you have a Victorian house in Santa Barbara, which there are those houses and bungalows, sometimes will have a knee wall upstairs. And in the way they construct, they don't have the insulation on the job when they do the knee wall, so it doesn't get insulated. So there's got to be a picture of a knee. Oh, here's one here. Like say you're using the attic space for a room, and Victorian houses have fairly steep things, so they almost always make rooms in them. You don't want to go to sometimes they'll just go to the corner and you'll have a sharp triangle, but you can't really use that space for much because it's only up a couple of feet. So they often put a wall that, cuts that triangle, and then the room's on this side of the wall. But they don't insulate this area underneath here before they do the wall, because insulation's a process that comes after the framing. So often this doesn't get insulated, and then that whole, heat from the room below will just come up and out through there. So that's what they're talking about, to make sure that the knee wall and the roof behind the knee wall get insulated. So that's a rare case, but that could happen in Santa Barbara. Then there's soffits. They used to put a lot more soffits in kitchens and bathrooms. You know what a soffit is? Let's see if there's a picture somewhere here. Oh yeah. So you see this? Does everybody see this on the left here? Yes?
Yeah.
Yes.
So they used to put cabinets because they don't go to the ceiling, because an 8-foot ceiling is too high to reach into a cabinet. Although they're doing it now, but they used to put they'd bring out the wall above it so that the cabinet would hit there, and then there wouldn't be a space to collect dust above it. Now they put cabinets all the way up. And then people just have to get chairs but they can still store stuff up there. They just need a stool or a chair to get to it. But in the old days, and you'll still see this, they have these what are called soffits, and those aren't insulated either, and behind them. So all that can be done, and then when the insulation comes, you can't get back there. So there's a lot of leakage that can occur in a soffit. So that has to be done along the way. A lot of times a house isn't waterproof, so they don't want to put bats of fiberglass or any kind of loose fill that can get wet. The loose fill stuff just soaks up water. So they don't insulate till later. But one of the solutions is to put rigid insulation that's more waterproof into those areas right when you build them. And then if the roof's not done in time or whatever, they won't get so wet that they'll disintegrate like other insulation. Plumbing penetrations, we'll look at that. Those are notorious because plumbers aren't real careful with the holes they make.
Patrick,
Yes,
can I ask a question about knee walls?
yes, of course.
So is the in that picture, so our roofs have insulation on the inside, right?
Well, it varies.
I see.
So
They should though, right?
well, now it's the preferred method is to insulate the roof. It
Mhm.
was before we just insulated the attic floor.
Oh, I
then-
see.
Because, the reason why is because we use dark asphalt shingles
Mhm.
and the heat got so intense that it could actually start fires. If you go in old houses, you may not see fire, but you'll see singeing. You'll see kind of a black singeing effect where a fire could have started.
Mhm.
And so they put vents in the attic to keep it cool. And if you put vents in the attic to keep it cool, you don't want to insulate it because the vents would violate the reason for insulating.
Mhm.
So now they're saying put insulation in there and that'll keep it from getting hot. They have all kinds of solutions for that. But if it's a real hot area, they have extra things you can do, like
Mhm.
putting rigid insulation over the top. But in this area where it's not that hot, we can just get away with fiberglass. But now they're saying because HVAC equipment was up there, it was always put in the cold. It was always put in a thing open to the air, an unconditioned space.
Mhm.
So in moderate climates, that didn't hurt the stuff. But if you put it in a cold climate and the air going through there was freezing, it would really impact the efficiency of your HVAC equipment. And so now the last 10 years, they've said, no, let's make this attic space part of the thermal envelope. And then you can put equipment up there, it'll work better. You won't be able to put vents, so you'll have to deal with the need for air or whatever, some other way.
Mhm.
Does that answer it?
So
Yeah.
sort of. There's a side question on that. So
Yeah.
if you have a finished attic with a steep slope, so you want to put in knee walls, would it be sufficient to insulate the roof line, and
Yeah.
you call that your thermal envelope?
Yeah, you can
Okay,
go,
cool.
see, it comes up from the walls and then just goes up the roof. So you don't need to do the attic or the ceiling below or the attic floor.
Okay, got it.
Yeah, not at all. In fact, Riesinger, the guy that contractor that makes a lot of those YouTubes that we've been watching. Last week he talked about that way of building. I forget what it's called, but they don't even put overhang. Do you remember those images in the video where the rafters just stopped at the wall, and he could do a thermal envelope much easier without the rafters continuing because they're in the way then. And then he put fake rafters above that stuck out, and he got the same look. He had to build more. There's a little bit more building, but he got a really nice thermal boundary there. So they're actually doing more of that now, figuring out ways to make the roof and the walls come together, no leaks. Yeah, they're actually coming up with some good ideas. Okay, so let's go on to split level homes. They don't make these too much anymore, but there's always some around from the 70s when they made them, right? So, and if you got to remodel them, or someone calls you up, your company up and says, the house needs to be made warmer. What can you do? And it happens to be a split level home. Has anybody ever seen a split level home in Santa Barbara? Where you come in and you can go down to, a living room and up to a bedroom.
Yeah, and like a condo HOA.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
Yeah, I've seen those before, where it's
Okay,
like
so-
one building.
Yeah. So that's an old style. We don't build too much more, but like I said, yeah, you look at these old HOAs and just old houses that were built a while back, and you'll see everything. So this is what happens. You get the floors, they build the higher floor, this one, with full length studs and that, and then they attach the second floor to it. So anytime you're attaching something, look out, it's like balloon framing. It seemed convenient, but that was before insulation and air sealing was an issue. But now it's just, it's really hard to insulate this kind of construction. So you have to, if it's already there, you might have to just put holes in the walls and try to blow in insulation. different things you can do, but they're just saying beware, look for that.
What about balloon framing makes it more difficult to insulate?
Yeah, right. Because,
No, what about it?
oh, well, pretend this is balloon framing here. So you've got 2-story studs on the outside. Say this is the floor between the 2 floors. It's just hung on the balloon frame, right?
Hmm.
And the attic, the third floor, which is the attic floor, will also be hung. And so you'll have air that can come up from the basement through these walls, and they're not closed off, through these walls all the way to the attic. So when we, next time I see a picture, actually you've seen some in some of the videos, but you don't remember them. They show where the attics, because you don't sheetrock the attic, right? So it looks like this. And you might have a floor come to the edge of the room, but this will still be open. And all that air can come up and make the attic cold if you're trying to use it, or make the room below cold. I'll see if I can show you a picture, but if you go up into a house, a balloon framed house, up to the attic, you'll see giant areas where the walls are just open, and they go all the way down the house.
That's all our attic is. When I go up there, it's just all one big open space.
Above the walls, yeah. So we saw a film where it wasn't a balloon framing, but it was some kind of, it was a partition the way it was done, and it was open through the partition up into the attic. Remember? And they said, don't just spray it, it's too big, and they put down some insulation and they sprayed over the insulation. Do you remember that? I think it was last week or a week before. But yeah, no, and we'll look at ways to fill those holes. That's where we're going to look at next. The actual materials you can use. Spaces around chimneys. So chimneys go through floors, and if they're not sealed adequately, and in the old days they weren't, because we didn't have any caulking that could resist the heat. So we just put boards up close, and of course bricks aren't real even things, and all the air from the room below would just come right in, would leave, and it would leave and go to the next room, next floor, and eventually go to the attic and leave. So you'd lose all that air. That's not counting the chimney air. That's just the fireplace air. That's just the chimney. So we do have caulking that can take heat that we can use on there. You can put metal, 26 gauge metal, sheet metal up close so that it won't burn. If you get it if you put it next to the brick, it could heat up enough to burn. So you can put sheet metal, and then you can caulk it with that high temperature caulk. Exhaust fans, if you have old ones, they didn't have gaskets. I don't know how good those gaskets are. They don't look that great, but they say where all these flex things, electrical lines enter the boxes, they have rubber gaskets now. So that air, this part sticks down into the room. It's got a light in it, but it's got all kinds of cracks. So when warm air gets up in there, it won't go past this because this is all gasketed. So at school I've got, and maybe at some point, if we either go back or I can show it from school, I can compare these kind of recessed lights, but all the new ones are gasketing and pretty airtight. If you have old ones, the best thing to do is replace them, because you can get you have to replace newer lights anyway, and they may not fit. But if you can't afford to, or just some reason you don't want to, then you have to go in the attic and you have to build something over it out of like insulation panels, or drywall, and seal it so that it creates a little place and you can insulate around that. Oh, here it is. Here's a drywall box air seal. And they do that so you can keep the air from coming up, but also the insulation can then be put against that and keep that area warm. And the insulation doesn't touch the the can. They used to worry about that. Okay, air hatches and stairways. They still don't have a good, no, they don't show it. How many of you have openings that go into your attic that have a ladder that falls down, or just an opening that you have to get a ladder yourself and to go up into it?
Got one
Anybody?
right here right behind you.
Okay.
I got one.
Okay, so a lot of us have one. If you have an attic and you use the attic for storage, or you just need to get, say your HVAC equipment's up there, you got to access it. The worst ones are the stairways, because you can imagine how hard it'd be to gasket a stairway. But even the regular, just square openings are bad. And in my house, I'll show you a picture. I actually figured out how to use, in double hung windows, they have a latch, and the latch is curved, and it kind of, as you close it, it kind of pushes pressure down on the window. Right? That's why sometimes to open a double hung window, it's kind of hard, because it's pressure fit. Any of you witnessed that?
Yes.
Okay. So I took that same mechanism. I said, well, if you can close it and it puts pressure, let's use it for the attic access. But it's not so simple, because it's a different configuration than a window. So I had to play with it. And now I have it so it actually pulls the access panels down to the trim in the attic ceiling, and that trim's got gasketing on it. So, but they've been saying you have to use some kind of hardware to pull it down for 10 years, and I've never seen anybody sell this. You go to any hardware store or lumberyard, and they don't know what you're talking about. So that would probably be actually a good business to go into, is making a device that pulls down your attic access so it clamps against the seal, right? No entrepreneurs in our class? Because we're sealing more and more. We're getting more and more obsessive about sealing. And so finally, that's going to become an issue, and someone's going to come out with a mechanism that you just screw on it that tightens it down on all four sides or two sides. Because it's usually a piece of plywood or sheetrock. Those of you who have just no ladder, but just the opening, what's that door made out of? The hatch.
What door?
The hatch into the ceiling.
Mostly just sheetrock.
Yeah, a lot of times it's just sheetrock that's just balanced. So sheetrock doesn't weigh enough, and where it hits, you should go up and look, take a ladder and look at the seal where the sheetrock hits it's usually some trim, and it lays on the trim. See if that's how if there's any space there. Because sheetrock can warp, right? Any plywood, anything can warp. And unless you have weight on it that's going to push it down, and then you have a seal around it, some kind of weather stripping, it's not going to be sealed. And that's the warm air is going up, because warm air rises. So it's going right into that little door area and going right through into your attic. You're losing all that air. And I can show you what I've done. I just took like I said, a double hung window latch, and I put it on in a way that does that. I'm not that bright. It took me a lot of hours to figure out how to turn it. But I've got it there, and I'll take a picture of it and show you next week. But that was just handmade, but someone should manufacture something that just fits, you don't have to think about it. You just install it and it's there. That's all I'm going to plug for that. Okay, here's a balloon framed interior. So here's the, I don't know where this is, but here, this was open, right? These were studs. Yeah, a lot of time the joists are nailed against the studs, and they can either cantilever, or this could be a partition. But instead of putting a rim and then hanging these, which would, block that area. They just, everything goes through and is nailed sideways onto things. So this is open. So this opening in the interior just goes from floor to floor with all the hot air. So this says put, just like in the movie we saw, the video we saw, you put insulation here because it's too big to spray right away. And then you put a 1-inch layer of spray foam over that. So you can do that in your attic. Balloon frame gables, I don't know. So these are all, try to figure out these pictures. They're all. Oh yeah, and then air ducts. They're put in, like you have a duct in the floor. And, I have a whole bunch of visual aids. I have a whole bunch of ducts at school to show you the leaks and how you can, maybe I'll go and take pictures of that next week and show you a little late. I made all these little visual things to show you how they leak. And they're really easy to seal ducts. The ducts, what goes inside the duct comes from the heater. That's fine, but the outside the duct, the air comes in that same hole that the ducts cut, because they cut it a little big. So the air from that either basement room or a wall comes through that crack into your room. It's not even part of the stuff that the duct's pumping into your room. So there's a lot of room for caulking there. Oh, here you go. The boots. So you can put a caulking on there before you put the boot down, and then that seals that whole area. What is this? Oh, see this silicone bulb weather strip? Yes?
Yes.
Yep.
So we have them, I forget what they're called, damn it. I'll bring that, I'll bring this stuff home or show you at school next week. They have these little, they're solid, they're not empty like this. And you can get bags of them at Home Depot. And for long holes, they're rolled up in a bag, so maybe 20 feet long. So for long holes that are more than 1/4 of an inch, remember it said caulking, you shouldn't go more than 1/4. You can put these little foam, they're not like this, they're actually foam, but they come in different diameters. And you can stuff those in those cracks and then put caulking over that. I think we've got a picture somewhere else of that. I'll show you that. Okay. So there's, oh, here it is. What do you call these? Backer rods. Ever hear that? You can get these at Home Depot in different thicknesses or whatever you need. But you put those in because, like, here's an opening and you have to caulk, and the caulk would just, you'd fill full of caulk and eventually it'd all dry out. Right? So you put these backer rods in first, and then you just put a little 1/4 of an inch of caulk against that, and it saves you all that. Because even if you had 50 gallons of caulk to put in there in a hole that was 6 inches deep, you could possibly fill it, but it's all going to dry out, right? And it's going to have all kinds of holes. It just is not made for that big area. So you can get these up to 3/4 of an inch down to maybe 1/4 and fill any size hole. These are really great. This is the same thing. Other trades making holes in your walls. And I'll show you on this next bunch of handouts a better picture of those. Sealing ducts. Oh my God. So have you ever seen these or work with these ducts, the elbows? And they come straight and you turn the elbows so they make a 90-degree, right? But because they turn, they have to be somewhat loose so air can get through. So the conditioned air inside the ducts can get out these joints. And that goes for almost everywhere where sheet metal comes together. So there's mesh tape and what's this? Mastic that you can put on all these things. And I'll show you better pictures of those too. You know, air sealing is like a whole obsession in this world. So, okay, so here's some thermal boundary flaws. There's your knee wall. Sometimes this isn't insulated because, or even this, because they build a knee wall, so then you can't get to this area. So they insulate up here. And they go, well, that's fine because we've insulated this room, but then the air can get through here, right? So that's a passageway. Porches are also bad for a similar reason. And collar ties are also bad because the insulation you put there, the collar tie is nailed on one side of a rafter. And so there's a little 2x6 space that the insulation can't really cover. That creates cracks there. Similar thing with the porch. Basements have the same kind of thing, the kind of plates you put on. So these are the major problem areas. So here's air sealing safety, and we're going to talk about this in another unit when we look at the BPI testing, because they're really into combustion zone safety. But what they're saying here is if you seal a house, if you do all these things that we've been looking at, and the house is really tight, you may have a carbon monoxide problem that you don't know about. And coming from your combustion appliances. And then you've just sealed that carbon monoxide in, and that's a deadly gas. So you've got to, when you seal it, you either yourself have to be aware of this, or if you get a company, they'll be aware of this. They'll have training that where they'll measure all the combustion devices ahead of time to see if they're leaking CO. And then once they're satisfied that they're not, then they'll go and seal up all the holes. Same thing with minimum ventilation. Sometimes you can seal a house so much that it's not leaking enough to meet the minimum ventilation requirement. And we're going to look at what that is when we do the ventilation unit coming up. But the whole idea now is to plug it up so it doesn't meet that requirement, but then to bring in fresh air to meet that requirement. So instead of air leaking where you don't want it to leak and you can't control it, plug the whole house up and then bring in air where you can control it. Where it comes in, you can even heat it as it's coming in if you're in a cold area. So we have a lot of machines that contribute, and that's kind of the wave of what we're doing now, because we realize we really have to make the houses more efficient, more airtight. Okay. Then the foam sealants keep changing. Every year they improve. If you go to Home Depot, there's a whole rack. You've seen that, right? Some of you. And they're all for different things. Some are for spaces that are hot, so they have a heat resistance. Some are for windows because they don't expand as much. When they had only one type of foam originally, guys would go in and they would put it in between their windows and the trimmers, and the foam would expand too much and it would knock the side of the window in, and then you couldn't open the window. So they figured it out after about 5 years, and then they said, well, let's make one that doesn't expand so much, and we'll call it window and door foam. So now you go and you can get that, and you don't get in as much trouble. You still have to be careful when you do it. So, but they've got, 6 or 8 different types of foam now. So I'm not going to go through it. You should go there. If you take my green building class next semester, we have a Saturday field trip day, and we go to Home Depot and we look at this display area that's got a million types of foams. A great way to learn about what's available is to go down to a store that stocks all this crap.
They even have one that supposedly repels pests and rodents.
Yeah, really. I haven't seen that. Yeah, they're coming up with new things. So that's why I take
Is there Is there like a professional at Home Depot that's really knowledgeable with like all the products? Like, is there like one dude that's like really knows what's up?
That's a
Well,
great question.
that's a great question. The rumor is that nobody knows anything at Home Depot, but that's not totally true. As much as it's partly true, there's usually one person who knows quite a bit. You got to find that person, of course, but there's often one person. Often he or she is the head of that whole area. They're not, there's like a hierarchy of people. They're sort of like the managers of that area. They usually know the most.
You need to
So
see
it's-
old guys.
But who interacts
And
with
old
schools,
guys,
like when there's field trips and stuff?
Well, I will talk, I will ask them, and I mean, I can, we can figure a lot of this stuff out just by looking at what's there, but yeah, we have to ask them stuff, sure. And we'll, if we go on a field trip, we usually find somebody that, I also showed lights when CFLs were just coming on and incandescents we realized were too hot and energy flagrant. CFLs, the compact fluorescents came out first before LED. And then LED came out a little bit. So it's a real mixed bag. And I used to take the class to the lighting section at Home Depot because that would tell you what they've just come out with. And those guys in the electrical and lighting, they're pretty savvy. And they could tell you stuff. So yeah, lighting's a good area to see there because they have, like for instance, at first the original dimmers wouldn't work on LED and sometimes on CFL. So you have to get a special dimmer, and it was a nightmare to link all that stuff up. And now they're just making dimmers that work for all of them. But in that whole intervening time, you had to really know what you were doing, or, your dimmers would, make everything flicker and your brain would go crazy. Let's see, what do we got here? Oh, here's an attic hatch, but it doesn't show anything about the door. But some people build up above the hatch, they build up a curb like this. I'm not sure why. A lot of times they'll put a door on the finish material that's there, right? The stop that's there. And then they'll put, like they used to put pieces of fiberglass insulation. So it doesn't have any side, right? So that's why they have this, because it keeps it from, rolling around or getting blown. But that's not very good anyway. The best way to do it, if you want to insulate this door, we would talk about air sealing, but people also like to insulate it because it's just a thin piece of sheetrock or plywood. That doesn't have any insulation value. And you got all that warm air coming up. So but it's better to put rigid foam because that won't go away. You can just glue layers of, get the really 6 R value polyisocyanurate, and just it comes in 2 and 4 thicknesses. Just do as much as you feel like. That still will have leaking around the edge, right? Because that foam, you can't get too close because you have to be able to open the attic access. So, that's a real challenge. It's kind of fun to experiment. The attic access, that's a real challenge of how to make it airtight and insulated.
I've actually got to build a door for our attic access from the garage.
What's that?
I got to make a new door for our attic access.
That's outside maybe, huh?
It's in my garage.
Oh, yeah. So some houses have that. That's a better way to do it for sure. Because you can seal a door better, a vertical door.
I don't know if you can
Yeah.
see it in the background there.
Yeah, great. Thanks for bringing that up. Because in fact, this bathroom I'm doing with this friend, they have that too. In their garage, they have a door that goes into it's a 70s Mesa home. So maybe they did that for a certain period. That's kind of cool.
I think that's around the time our house was built, 70.
Yeah. It's a great idea. You just had to have a garage that has an extra part of a floor, to put that door, which is easy to do, right? You just don't put an attic in the garage. You have it go up partway up the house.
They did a
Um,
remodel before we bought it, and so they
Yeah.
have like a little platform right when you go up in there. There's
Oh,
actually
yeah.
a floor to step on, and then there's a
Oh, cool.
catwalk all throughout
Oh,
it.
cool. Yeah, yeah. I think this place I'm doing has that too. That's cool. Yeah, some of those old ideas are actually better than the newer ones. You can see how much simpler it is just to carve a hole in your hallway attic ceiling and put a thing in. So it saves money. That's probably why they stopped doing the other stuff. Here's the thing on porch structures. I'm not going to go into that. Cantilever floors are a really pain in the ass. Not only for, it's the same thing as balloon framing, just the fact that you have boards that are nailed sideways on the boards. Oh, here you can see the balloon framing. This is the stucco, this is the plaster on the inside. They've taken away the outside wall. But see, this floor is all open. The floor joist just open right up to the wall cavities. And in those old days, they didn't put insulation in that. When platform framing was big, we didn't use insulation. So it's like a beehive full of holes. Cantilever floors, not only are they hard to insulate, but they're hard to waterproof. And I think we talked about this. I can't remember if it was this class or the one before, but there was a balcony in Berkeley at an apartment house, and a bunch of fraternity kids, or maybe they're just students, had a party out on the balcony. And the boards had been rotted at the house because they weren't waterproof properly, and the whole balcony collapsed. You know, they had about 10 people on it, and I think one or two got killed. So
I think that was Isla Vista.
hey, well, it could be Isla Vista too, because but any place they have cantilever things. So cantilevers are really great because you don't need a wall below. They're kind of really cool, you know, but you got to really be careful. And nowadays, you have to really look at what you're doing to make sure that water doesn't get in to rot the joint. You don't want it to fall. Backer rod, we talked stuffing materials, fiberglass bats. You can't use them for insulation to stuff because it won't work, but you can use them just as a material to take up space so you can foam on top of it. So bats are great for, you know, a base for your foam. Brown cellulose. Caulking and adhesives. Or I'm not going to talk too much about that because a little bit, because those change all the time. They improve. The lastingness of duration of them go up all the time. Water-based caulks are the least durable. Silicone's the most durable, but it's a pain in the ass to use. I'm sure a lot of you have used them. It sticks to all your tools in your hands, and you need a paint thinner or something to get it off. But it does do a better job. They do last longer. Butyl's even worse. Polyurethane's bad too. Water people like because it's just water cleanup, and but it dries out and it doesn't last as long. So you want to use your silicone and polyethylene, and those change. Every year I go to Home Depot, there's a different bunch of caulking. That's another thing to go look at. It's interesting. By the paint section, there's a whole wall of caulking for everything. Every kind of liquid nails you could want there too. So I think, oh yeah. Okay, now it's 7:21. Do we need a break?
Yeah, I wouldn't mind one.
Okay, so 7:21, so 7:30 or so, come back, 7:31. Yeah,
Sounds good.
all right,
Sure.
see you then. And then we'll rush through this, try to get you out of here.
Hey, Patrick,
Hey, what?
I have a question for you. So
Yeah.
if you're doing a rot repair and water damage repair, and you're kind of getting into some structural stuff because termites ate some studs, so you replace them, but it's not really like major. You're only doing like one apartment or one condo like per week. Would you need a permit for that?
I don't know.
Also, if we're
Just
replacing ballast,
replacing some termite damage.
yeah, it's like we're not doing anything different than the plans. Like literally whatever was there, we just do new studs and we just new siding.
Yeah, I don't think it needs a permit.
Okay, if there's outlets that aren't GFCI in their exterior, and we take the device out and we put it back in, shouldn't we change it out with a newer one?
Yeah. Yeah. Make sure you follow all the grounding rules, you know.
Yeah, like what if the balusters aren't 4 inches? So like we took down some railing and we set it to the side because it wasn't damaged. And then after we repair the deck, we're gonna put those balusters back up. Should we like, is it illegal to do that since we already took them down?
Well, what's wrong with the balusters?
There's nothing wrong with the balusters in the railing itself, but like underneath it, that little wall was rotted out.
So you're replacing the balusters?
No, there's like a 2-plate bottom plate wall underneath it.
And then balusters and then a top plate?
Yeah, the balusters are like a separate unit that you could like take the whole unit out and set it down, replace the like messed up wood, and then we're
Yeah.
gonna put it back. Is that illegal?
So what'd you say was 4-inch? The spaces are bigger than 4-inch?
Yeah, they're like, 5 inches, or like you could like totally put like a 4-inch ball through it, which is like not to code, right?
Yeah, so I'm not sure what the code is, 4 or 5 or 6, it varies and it changes.
I think it's
Code
4.
says 4 inches.
Think it's 4? Okay.
I think
Yeah.
it's supposed to be like small enough for a baby's head can't technically get through. Is like what they're shooting for in safety wise.
Yeah. So, well, I think it's illegal to replace them because it's it's a danger as long as you're taking them off. But, and it's probably unethical. I mean, it's housing, right? There's perhaps
Yeah, there's
babies
just
around.
like family housing stuff.
Right. So there's going to be a lot of babies and stuff. So it's probably, just ethically, it'd probably be a good idea to, can you put an in-between baluster or piece of wood? Are the
Yeah,
balusters
but it's
round?
like they're like 2x2 balusters. So if you do that, you're gonna have a bay that's like 2 inches. So it'd be like kind of ridiculous.
Well, how about a rod?
Like through it, like
No,
horizontally.
just in that space. Have the 2x2s and every other one have a rod, rebar, anything.
Doing a
Whatever's
1
cheap.
by 1 strip.
Yeah, I see what you're saying about 2x2 being too bulky. It would look kind of crazy. But
Mhm.
if you just had a thin bar, like a 1/2-inch bar, that's going to stop a baby's head from going through there. If you could get a bar that was cheap enough and wasn't going to rust out right away, that's one possibility. Yeah, don't go the other way because then that's going to be too involved going horizontally with stuff, I think.
Uh-huh.
That might, I mean, if you can pull the little, you can pull the baluster and it's 2x4 top off, right? Then that means you can drill through both ways. Or you could, yeah. It's an idea. Okay, so God, I didn't realize there's so much to learn about sealing houses. Okay, try to wrap this up here. I want to show you a couple of cool videos. Okay, so this we don't need anymore. Oh yeah. Now I'll rush through this thing. Now, this is the same thing. What, can I get it? With any luck. Come on, baby. Can you see this? Section 3, no?
We're in the folder view.
You can only see the folders, huh? This one's way too big. What about in your canvas? There's an idea. There's an idea ahead of its time. Let's go to the canvas. Because it's in Canvas, right? Your canvas. The only reason I pull it out, I have the folders outside of Canvas is because you can enlarge them. Sometimes you can't enlarge them in Canvas. But at this point, there's 20 pages of slides, even though we can go through them quickly. That's a lot to pull out. So let's see if we can just. Okay, so let's see. Vacation week, heat transfer. Okay, shell sealing. So that must be this assignment. Okay, so. Can you see this? Air sealing homes.
Yeah,
we can do-
Yeah.
Did we just do this? Oh yeah, we just did this, right? Okay, section 3, everybody see that?
Yeah.
Now we're talking. Okay, forget all this. They probably still make elastomeric, they call it, there's an old name for it. But you're not gonna see that. You just gotta go to the caulking section and get, the different kinds of caulk will tell on the, what do you call that, a tube? Will tell on the tube what it's for. That's just the best way to do it. Some of these names are, Okay, so they make these little mesh pieces. You can buy these and you can put them around pipes, different size, and then you can plaster or sheetrock mud over these, integrate them into the wall, yeah? So that's a way of, say you have a pipe this big, a drain pipe going through the wall, but the holes like comes out to here. Then you can just slap this on the wall around the pipe. Usually they're cut at one side so you can, or maybe they're two, and you put them together around the pipe and then you just put mud over it and integrate it into your wall, yeah?
Yep.
Okay, now here's the plumbing penetrations. They've got those, what do you call those things? It's, the little loose things that cover the pipe as it goes through the wall.
Caps?
No, you see where I'm pointing? They're loose sheet metal or tin little finish
cover plates. Or-
cover plates. It's got a name like a scutcheon or something like that. I forget. But yeah, so those are there to cover up the plumber's gnarly hole. So you'll have to take those off or pull them forward and get in there and patch that Same thing with the drains. So these plumbing penetrations are often, I mean, you know, if you have a 1/4 inch bigger hole, that's going to let out a lot of air, right? This, you can do the same thing for like a drain that's going through the wall. You can use that same kind of collar or mesh. The mesh ones are good because you can really put the sheetrock mud over them pretty easily. It sticks to them good. Yeah, here's a mesh one, same thing. Comes in halves, so you put the halves around the hole. You may have to cut this to fit the actual drain. And then just muck it up in your okay, now so here's a wall. A drain through the floor can have a big hole. These spigots might have holes. There's going to be leakage around the window. This big leakage around electrical panels. And outlets have leaks around them, and duct. This is like a dryer duct that could have a leak around it too. So, and here's one of the big problems is, you know what dampers are, right? So this is called a gravity damper because gravity pulls it to a horizontal position so it fills the hole of the pipe and no air will go out, your preciously heated air. And then when you cook, the hot air pushes one side up and that stuff can escape. But in order to make that really work well and be flexible, they have to make this diameter a little bit less than the vent, the duct, right? So a little 1/8 of an inch they make in there so it doesn't get stuck, lets air out. So they're probably making better dampers now, but just look into that if you can. Make sure you get the best damper, the best fitting. They may have come up with some bright ideas in the last 10 years. Furnace, if some of you have doors into your attic, vertical doors, you may also have furnaces in closets in the hallway. That's what they used to do. So, and they would just bash holes in the top like they do everywhere else. You know, HVAC people are like plumbers. And you have to seal that because you don't want all the air going out of your house through those. So you use a metal because you can't get close to a pipe that's, you know, a vent that's venting hot air with wood or something because it'll catch on fire. So you've got to put metal. You have to put sheet metal around it. And then you can, you know, you can cover the sheetrock with, I mean, you can cover the metal with sheetrock mud or just leave it. If it's a utility area, you may not need to do anything else but this. And then there's high pressure caulk you can put around too in places, high temperature. You can get these with holes in them and just cut a slit so you can bend it into place, or sometimes they have a slit already cut, or you can cut it in half and just put both the halves together. Same thing here, you have vent pipes going into the attic. You want to make sure you've got caulking around them. Heat producing device. They used to say you couldn't put insulation up close to a recessed light. That's why you have that box. Some of the incandescents were hotter. The LED are cooler. So I think you might be able to put insulation right up against the recessed box now. This is a chimney, yeah, flue, so it's going to be hot. So you have to use metal and special caulking for that. So here's a place where a wall is underneath an attic, and the wall, they're just gonna nail the edge of the wall to the bottom of this joist and not do anything about what's above here. So this is open. So any air in the wall will come into the attic. Or it could be a second floor and go laterally or get out some other way. But they're talking about putting foam board's another thing you can use besides, you can use fiberglass and foam on top of that, or you can use foam board, which is more rigid, right? And then just foam the edges of it. So a couple things you can there. Foam works better than caulk in these particular areas. I guess you could caulk it too. Okay, here's a platform framing. So today we would put the we have a footing and a stem wall, and then we put a plate, and we wouldn't put the studs on here. We'd put the joist on the plate with a rim joist, and then we'd put the flooring, then we'd start the walls above that. That's why I call it platform, because you make a platform and then you put the wall on the platform. So this older style, they would have the walls start right at the basement and go all the way up, and then each floor they would hang it. If there was at the bottom, you can rest it on the plate, the sill plate, but the next floor is just going to be hanging in the air. So that's open from the basement to the wall. And even if you have insulation on the wall, you're going to get air leakage along the edge of that insulation. So you've got to do special things when you have, platform framing, especially in the basement area. And then here's one that nobody remembers, or you put a bathtub in, right? And you've got an open area underneath because you've got supply and drain pipes, and that has to be pretty open. So the floor's got a giant hole to let the plumbers work in there. And so any warm air or cold air from the crawl space can go up between the joist. And if you just have the joist with, if you did insulate it, but you have either rigid foam board that you've cut, you never cut it perfect. So there's always going to be leaks along the edge. And certainly with fiberglass, there's going to be leaks. And so the cold air is going to go right up through all that into your bathroom under the tub, right? So make sure you do something to seal off. You can't do a lot about this because the plumber needs that, but you can seal next to it. You can seal, you can cut off areas of the joist. There's a lot of things you can do in there. Again, I'm not going to talk about sealants and butyl and that. See what's available. Here it says caulk gaps up to 5/8. That's pretty big. I don't know if I'd go that far. So, and they're talking about elastomeric caulk. So that, and they still make that. I don't know if they call it that, but that can fill bigger cracks in windows.
Does it have an expiration date?
Oh, that's a good question. Probably. Certain things will, because, they're sealed, I don't know. I think caulking, that's a great question. I'll look at some caulking I have at school and in my house and see if there's any dates on any of the caulking. But if it's something, if this elastomeric, whatever the hell that is, goes bad, goes bad after a time. Why you thinking about you find some old tubes and want to see if they're still good? Is that why you're asking? Hello?
No, I mean, like, if you put it on a window, how long does the window have?
Oh, yeah. They'll all have a date. Yeah, they'll all have I thought you meant a date to be used by. No, once it's open, they'll have a date for when they guarantee it. And that just, you can get, the cheaper ones are guaranteed for 5 years or 10 years. And then the more money you spend, it goes up to 20 and 25. Whether you can trust those companies or not is another thing, because there doesn't seem to be much evaluation of products anymore like that. So you're kind of taking their word for it. The other thing is the expiration date is one thing. And then the way you install it, apply it is another thing. Like I said, if you're using too big of a hole, the caulk's going to stretch, right? It's going to stick to the sides and eventually stretch with holes. So use those backer rods and make sure. So the way you apply it is as important as the longevity of it. And we've seen this picture before. Here's a closed cell backer rod. These are really bitchin'. When I found out about these, I thought, well, that's a great product because you can probably use, old plastic to make it. Nobody sees it, saves caulking, does the job. I have no idea what that's about. So we'll skip it. Here's another picture of backer rod. It's not complicated, but they insist on making us do it. So you can see, if you had to put caulking in this whole hole, it would separate. It's just too much for the caulking to stay filled up. But you put these backer rods in, and then you just have to fill a little bit on top, and that's manageable. Oh yeah. So they make these foam gaskets that you take off the plastic plate, and you can put these, and they have them for outlets and for switches and, quadruplex, any kind of thing. And they actually do keep air from going into your outlet. When I do the blower door test, if it had worked last week, I would have held the incense up to the outlets, and you would have seen the air go into it. So, and these things, they used to give it when they were promoting this originally, they'd give these away, like the contract association would get them away and places would give them away. But now I think they cost, but they're just foam rubber. They're not very expensive. So that's it. See, here's where they go. They go right in. See, this is not flexible. It's a rigid plate. So when it presses against this, there's all kinds of gaps around it that can let air in, but this kind of hugs the outlet itself, the outlet itself. So they're good. Oh my God, we're done. Okay, now, okay, so we'll go to maybe 8:15 because I want to show you a couple of videos real quick. These are really bitchin' videos. So let's see. Is this thing recording? Yeah. Okay. So we go to YouTube. And we go to, what class is this, 124? And we go to, okay, we'll look at this one first. Stop it. And we'll go to Zoom meeting. Big face, screen share, YouTube, share. Okay, we good? Can you see that?
Sure can.
Okay, then it's a
Those
go.
emotions, they were put on hold by time, by careers being built.
Yeah,
you can see that we have our diopter down. This is the Hexagon one, if you guys are familiar with this product. This one is, and the last couple of weeks have been extremely busy, and what you see around us is our plaster. Here in Massachusetts, we install blue board and a veneer coat plaster. What that means is the guys are installing a 1/2-inch gyp, very similar to drywall. Then they're doing a scratch coat, which goes over a fiber mesh tape over the joints, and then we're doing a solid veneer coat over the entire surface. This is a big stage for us. It means all the mechanicals and the electrical and plumbing, everything has passed inspection. We got our insulation and we are ready to roll into finishes. Now, one thing with plaster is it has to cure. It has to totally cure before we can prime it. And it's important that we prime it before we install trim because it does exert moisture, and we do not want to be installing unfinished poplar or unfinished backs of cabinets against raw plaster because that moisture could actually cause grain raising through our finishes. And we don't want to shut the job down for a week, so we use this time to meet with the guys over at Zone 6, and we did air sealing. They were here for 2 days getting this place airtight. I'm gonna kick it back a few days when Mike was on site with them, and they're gonna talk a little bit about why we took this approach on this.
So this is a new invention that's an alternative to a plastic, a really difficult. I put in so many plastic visqueen air barriers in houses, and you have to staple it, which is not good because there's a little air leak there. You have to tape over the staples. You have to put caulking where 2 layers of visqueen meet on corners or studs where you run out. You've got to be fastidious because you don't want any freaking holes. It takes forever. They came up with this machine that's going to let a blower door pressurize the house. The air will seek lower pressure, so it'll go through the cracks to the outside, and then they let loose this spray mist of caulking compound, and it follows the air and clogs the holes. So brilliant.
Hey guys, we're at our Newton renovation, and today we're installing air barrier. We have Nate from Zone 6 Energy. We have a old house in Newton from the 1930s. It's a structural brick house. There's 2 layers of brick. If you insulate it, you're gonna trap moisture in the wall, and you can actually hurt the overall performance of this house. Not being able to install insulation, that's kind of why we started looking into air barrier. If we air seal it, then we should be able to create a more comfortable house.
Absolutely. Right? Yeah, anytime the air is leaking out, that's a whole lot of your heated air just going through the roof or out the windows or out the walls, wherever it be. So
vice versa, we'll have cold air coming in, you'll feel drafty and uncomfortable.
Yeah, if the house is really tight, and of course it's got to be ventilated well, which you guys understand, but if it's really tight, you can get away with a little bit less R value because you're not losing any heat to convection. So all of your heat is staying right where it needs to be. Your air isn't just leaking out the sides as it were.
You mind just giving us a little description of what air barrier is and what we're doing today?
Absolutely. So air barrier is a method for air sealing a house, and essentially what we're doing is with the blower door, pressurizing the entire space to 100 pascals, so it's busting out, leaking at every leak point. And then we're spraying an aerosolized acrylic caulking into a mist in the air, getting it nice and thick in there. And then wherever the air is leaking out of the leak points, the caulking is going to follow, congeal at the edges, seal up at the seams. And we're reading the air changes on the computer as we go. The blower door is keeping track of it all. And then when we get to your target, which is under 1 ACH 50 in this case, we hit stop and clean up. That's the idea.
We did a benchmark test. We were both thinking we were going to be somewhere in the double digits. Right. We're like, 10, 12, something like that. And surprisingly, we were down at between 6 and 7, right?
About 6.5 ACH 50, which speaks a lot to the building practices that are going on.
But that's kind of like, that's your target to start air sealing, right?
Between 6 and 8, depending. We could maybe start at 9 or 10, depending on the size of the building. But yeah, if we can start out at a 6 or 8 ACH 50, then we're ready to go with aero barrier, and we can take it down sub 1 after that.
So anything above that, you got to go back, do a little more homework.
We're gonna find the bigger leaks. Yeah, if it's over 9 or 10 ACH, there are gonna be some.
Oh, darn it. What did I do? Crap. Sorry, hold on.
What's up, guys? I'm Nick Schiffer, and on this episode, we're going to be talking about a HERS rating and just what that is. What's up, guys? What's up, guys? I'm Nick Schiffer, and on this episode, we're going to be talking about a HERS rating and just what that is.
Using energy costs money and can contribute to pollution. Energy auditors and weatherization workers help customers use less energy, lowering their bills and reducing their impact on the environment. Energy auditors often begin by inspecting homes or commercial buildings to measure heat, cooling, electrical, and gas usage.
Be some big ones. We like to keep them all 1/2 inch or small.
So I wanted just to pause it and I hit the left arrow. That discussion they just had, in case you didn't understand it, they first take a reading with the blower door, and if it's below 8 air changes per hour, they can use this method because it means the cracks are small. You want 3 air changes per hour. No, you want 1/3 of an air change per hour, which is what the if you go below that, you have to bring in ventilation. I don't know, and they could be doing that, but they take the blower door test first to see if the holes are small enough to be able to fill with this compound. That's what they were talking about. So they said it was at 6 air changes per hour. So that was within the realm that they could just go ahead and start doing it.
Because a big leak like that is still going to seal, but it's going to take a long time to build in on the edges. There's going to be a whole bunch of material going out through the hole. So
is that what we can seal up to? You can seal up to like a 1/2 inch hole?
we say up to a 1/2 inch. Technically, it'll seal any size, but you know, it would take, I don't know, a day of spraying to build in the edges of a 2-foot hole. But 1/2 inch can be sealed up within an hour, hour and a half usually.
Crazy.
They got this house from a 6.8 ACH. Now, ACH is air changes per hour, down to a 1.93. It's a drastic and a tremendous improvement, especially being that this house is, number one, so large, but also so old. Now, I had this goal of being sub 1. I talked to Sean over at Zone 6 and said, listen, can we get this sub 1? And I think what we're gonna do is we're gonna try to approach the rest of this home with some old school methods. And what I mean by that is maybe finding areas that we can tighten up, whether it's back caulking, prior to, boarding the garage or portions of that, or just double checking that all our penetrations are totally sealed. One thing I really want to shed light on was above me here. I'm standing in the master bedroom, and what you're looking at is these blue lines on the ceiling. What that is actually a chalk line. These guys do this veneer coat on the plaster, and when they get to a certain point, they actually take their chalk line and snap it into the plaster. And what that allows them to do is work their trowel to a true line. It's really important, especially when in a room like this where you have a wall to a roof line to a ceiling, and we don't have any trim to cover up that transition.
Okay, they're no longer talking about sealing. And we got one more and then we're out of here. And that would be Matt Rissinger. Yay.
One of the great challenges in this world is knowing enough about a subject to think you're right.
Yeah, we don't care.
It's not often that I come across a product that I would put into the category of revolutionary. But on today's build show, I've got a product that I think is absolutely going to change the way houses are built in America when it comes to efficiency, indoor air quality, health, and comfort. On the build show today, we're going to be talking about a revolutionary product. It's actually a process that I think is dramatically going to change the way houses are built in America. We're going to be talking specifically about AeroBarrier. I saw these guys at the International Builder Show, and I wanted to do a first house with them. And in fact, this is the first house that's ever been air sealed in Texas with the AeroBarrier system. But before I get into all the specifics on how it was done on this house, let me tell you why air sealing is so important. I get tons of comments about houses being built too tight. Air sealing is critical to me as a builder. Here's why. There's 4 control layers every house needs to control. Number 1, water. If water gets in, forget about the rest of what we did as a builder. We're gonna get a lawsuit. We gotta fix it. It's a huge deal for us. So we have to waterproof. Number 2, air. When air leaks in, all kinds of bad things come with it, and we're gonna have a really hard time delivering a healthy house and a comfortable house to our clients if air can leak in uncontrollably. Number 3, we need to control vapor flows. Especially important for those northern builders up there because it depends on where that vapor barrier needs to be on the wall depending on the time of year. So it's a little bit trickier to control vapor. And lastly, houses need to control thermal. That's the insulation in the walls. That's the heat flow. Now that order of all 4 of those, super important. You're never gonna get a call at 2 a.m. from a client saying that your house is leaking air, but you're sure gonna get a call if your house is leaking water. But right behind waterproofing is air sealing. And it's super important to me as a builder because as a remodeler, I've seen tons of houses that had a bunch of condensation in the back of the sheetrock, which led to moisture and mold and all kinds of bad things. And remember, when that air leaks in, it's gonna bring with it pollen and all kinds of other nasties. And if air can leak in, typically those bugs can get in as well. So air sealing is super important. All right, so here's what we're doing here today, guys. We brought the AeroBarrier guys in all the way from Ohio to do the very first Texas house with their system. Now, this is a revolutionary system. I think it's incredible. Let me walk you through it start to finish. Now, first, we started with a pretty tight house over here. We actually did a pre-blower door test on this house, and we tested this at 1 ACH 50. But we wanted to be much tighter than that if we could, and here's where their system comes in. So what they do is they set up these nozzles around the house on a tripod stand, and you're gonna see these multicolored cords kind of running throughout the house. Now these nozzles are gonna spray an acrylic product, basically a kind of like an what's the word I'm looking for? Like an aerosol caulking into the air, a very, very fine caulking that's misted throughout the whole house. And then at the same time, they're gonna pressurize the house with the blower door running in reverse, meaning that we're gonna push air into the house. And then all those little cracks and crevices, all those small places that might leak air, that mist that's in the air of this, basically the acrylic caulk that's floating, is gonna start accumulating. Now I ran a really cool test. I've got a door over here set up where I've got an air conditioner coming through. So we've got a piece of plywood in there for temporary job site conditioning. And I cut 3 holes in that door. I ran a small hole, a 3/8 inch hole. I put a kerf cut on a saw, and then I ran a big 2-inch hole saw over there, and I put a screen door material over top of that. And as the test runs, as this aerosol accumulates, check out what's happening over here. The hole, the 3/8 inch hole, was totally glommed up. Basically a big, almost like a snot ball of this product, totally sealed that hole off. And in fact, they tell me they can seal up to a 1/2 inch hole. The kerf cut, again, almost looked like I put a direct bead of caulking on that kerf cut. But I found this super interesting. This is that screen material, and look how it accumulated on the screen here. You can see the back of the screen right here where you can still see the screen, and that white material from AeroBarrier just totally clogged up all those holes. And on the front side, it looks like just a white circle, almost as if it had been caulked over. My understanding is this actually happened pretty quick, and that's basically what's happening throughout the entire house. Now, this is a pretty tight house to begin with, but of course, there's all kinds of tiny and minute cracks everywhere, and that's what leads to that loss or that gain. And remember, when that air leaks in, it's bringing with us all kinds of things that we don't want. So if we can't make a proper envelope for our houses, we can't truly condition and serve our homeowners with healthy air on the inside. Now, of course, people are gonna comment, this house is too tight. Don't forget, guys, this is brand new construction. I've got a fresh air system. It's gonna run through my ventilating dehumidifier so I can drop the humidity out. It's gonna run through a giant media filter so I can take out all the pollens and all the nasty stuff. And then I can bring in air on my terms when I want that air, not just when the air is blowing. And it's not gonna be filtered through my stud bays where I might also get some particulate matter or some fiberglass or whatever it is in those stud bays. So this is an incredible process. Now again, we started with a very tight house, and they ran this test for about 90 minutes start to finish. And at the end of the 90 minutes, guess what my score was? 0.3 ACH 50. Now, if you're not a nerd out there, you don't know what that means, but let me translate that to code. Code requires us to have a tight envelope that in the north is a 3 ACH 50. So I'm actually a 1 before I started, a 0.3. I'm 90% better than code.
Okay, so don't listen to this because it's wrong. It's an air change every 3 hours is what the code says. So how many is that per hour?
1/3.
1/3. So it's 0.3 air changes per hour is the minimum ventilation a house should have according to the building code. So I think you got a little confused here. It's easy because we're trying to say air changes per hour, but you know, and we like that whole number 3, but it's actually 3 air change. It's actually an air change every 3 hours.
Code if I'd built this house in the north. Down here in the South where I am, I only need to make a 5 ACH 50, and now I've got a 0.3. So this is a much, much tighter house than what even code requires. All right, now I want to bring on Sean.
So if his house is 0.3 now, he's met the minimum ventilation requirement. But usually people try to get him even tighter than that. And then they have to bring in air to meet that requirement.
Sean Harris. Sean is actually one of the local guys that you've seen in my videos before. And Sean helps me on all kinds of different things in my houses. But Sean, you ran with the AeroBarrier crew from Ohio today in doing this install. I know one of the questions we're going to get is, what does this cost? How would you answer that question?
Well, Matt, the price varies dramatically. We're not talking about hundreds of dollars, we're talking more thousands of dollars, but it really depends on the square footage, how much leakage there is. If you're starting at a 10 ACH 50, that would be one thing, you know, trying to get 10 down to 0.5 or lower, it's gonna be quite challenging and time consuming. Not everybody can build a 1 ACH 50 house, you know, to start out with,
So Sean, as you've seen this now in person, and on my house, how would you see other builders maybe using this process?
I think this is great. It's going to be able to have people rethink that the materials that they're using for air sealing, for example, you could go with AeroBarrier, and then you wouldn't need to use spray foam as your air sealant, and you can maybe go with a more cost-effective insulation that way.
Yeah, and you know, another thing that I was thinking too, Sean, is I don't know if you saw my Zip 2.0 videos, but we could use the Huber Zip system on the outside, which is already a pretty airtight system. And then we could hang either our air barrier or our drywall on the lid, depending on where you are in the north versus the south. And then prior to insulation, you could actually come in and spray this air barrier system. Would that work?
That would be great, Matt. And what's really great about that is that you can then quantify the results of the building envelope before you start adding insulation and things that would cover those things up. You already know that you're passing it, you're fine.
So they're talking about not using spray foam, Icynene. So Icynene's, one of the beauties of Icynene is you put it in a stud bay and it also acts as an air barrier, a closed cell foam. So you kill two birds with one stone, but it's costly. Icynene's the most expensive insulation, and it's pretty toxic when it's wet, when you're applying it. So you really have to take precautions. I think when it's inert, it's safe enough, but it is expensive. So they're saying if you put this spray machine, this aerial barrier on, it will, before you put the insulation in, it will fill the cracks in the stud bays. So then you can just put any kind of insulation because you'll already have an air barrier. Now, the problem with that is you're putting the air barrier on the outside of it's on the inside of the outside of the wall, right? You've got plywood across your studs on the outside, and this is sticking to where the plywood and the studs, if there's any gaps in there. But then you're allowing, if you don't put another air barrier on the inside, you're allowing moisture to get into the wall, and it can't go outside of the wall because it's sealed. It's got an air barrier. Now, these guys, I think this is Matt's own house, and I think he lives in Texas, so maybe it's a very hot area that never gets cold, so that would probably be okay. But you couldn't bypass Icynene like that in a cold area.
Or what your leakage scores are. It's this repeatable process, a turnkey solution that can really benefit everyone involved.
Sean, tell me, would this work on a remodel situation as well?
Yes, sir, definitely. Remodels are great. There's a little more prep involved in remodels as far as covering the floors and things. In this particular case, we've got some plywood down that's under the subfloor, so we're not going to worry about needing to cover that. But in a remodel situation, more care will have to be taken.
Yeah, because this aerosol caulk is going to land on those horizontal surfaces, you either need to have a rough surface like this that we're not worried about, it's going to get covered later, or you could cover that. But that's, honestly, I think that's something that's going to come into its own on this product in the next couple years, is really we could see every house that gets resold come in.
Okay, what'd you think about that?
I think that's amazing.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. You know, it hasn't been around a lot, so we'll have to, we'll have to keep doing research on it and make sure that it stays intact over the years, right? we don't have any long-range studies, but they seem pretty optimistic about it. So let me close today, 5 minutes on the board, just to talk about the position of air and vapor barriers real quickly, one last time. Well, it won't be the last time because you never stop talking about it, but okay, so can everybody see that?
Yes.
What is that?
It's a wall.
It's a cross section of a wall. Okay.
You gotta put the little
Well, let's say
X's
this-
though.
Let's say this is the outside and this is the inside. And we'll have sheathing normally out here. Okay. So you've got, you create a lot of moisture. Oh, I forgot to talk about everybody's breathing. Our carbon dioxide is surrounded by moisture, right? Our body produces moisture. So everybody's breath, you all know that, right? That's what you see in cold days, your breath, the air and the moisture in your breath is showing. So showers, cooking, breathing, you got a whole bunch of moisture in your house and you're heating the air, and warmer air takes more moisture. You know, the hurricanes that are happening in the Gulf, the warmer the air gets from global warming, the more water those hurricanes can hold. So the damage is almost less from the wind, but more from the flooding because they're holding so much damn water. The amount of water these last few hurricanes dropped in the South was phenomenal. The flooding was the worst disaster, not the destruction of the actual wind. So anyway, the warmer the air gets, the more water it holds. So you're heating your house up, normal activity. So if you've got no inside air barrier, let's make the water vapor. Oh, we should make it blue, right? Water is blue. So it's coming into the wall, right? I mean, there's sheetrock, but it's going to get through that if it's not caulked, especially. It will go through sheetrock too eventually.
Doesn't Tyvek breathe from the inside out?
I'm sorry, what?
I thought Tyvek breathes from the inside out.
Did you say Tyvek?
Yeah, like it breathes from the inside and it only goes one direction.
Yeah, okay, so let's put Tyvek on. I hadn't put Tyvek on yet. So we got sheathing and then we got Tyvek over the sheathing. There we go. Thanks for reminding me. Although that isn't what I was going to talk about. But in cold climates, yeah, right? Say you live in some place that freezes overnight. That cold air is going to get into it's going to go through your wall. The temperatures, it's going to change the temperature of the air in your wall to below, to a certain value. And that's called, and it's cold. And then the warm air hits, this is warm, right? Coming from your house. This is cold coming from outside. Where they hit, and it's called a dew point. And it'll be anywhere, the dew point may be really closer to your wall here if there's not a lot of heat. It could be out here more. But that dew point is where the temperature comes above the condensation level, the temperature it takes for condensation. And at this dew point, the vapor becomes water. So it's going to leak on your sill and rot those out eventually. It's going to wreck any kind of insulation that's in here. So when it's cold out in a cold climate, you don't want this warm air to get into the wall because it's got all that moisture. So you're going to put visqueen here, big barrier of plastic. And then the hot air will go in very slowly, not enough to, not enough of it to cause a condensation in the wall. So that's the worst case. So in climates that are mixed, where the winter is really cold and the summer is really hot, we've got a lot of those. Even up north, we've got them. It's kind of varies from place to place, Even the Northwest, which used to be cold all the time, or temperate in the summer and then cold, is now getting hot. Remember that heat wave this summer that Oregon and Washington had? My God. So it's more important to keep the water out of the wall and keep your house warm. We can live with a lot more warmth than we can. It's uncomfortable, but it takes a lot of heat to make us sick and die. It doesn't take that much cold to make us uncomfortable and freezing. So I would say the most important thing is to keep if it's a mixed climate, if you do this in a climate that's hot in the summer, that hot air is going to come in here and it's going to get into the house some. But you can deal with hot air in the house. You can have air conditioning, different things. You can shade. There's a lot more you can do with the heat and still have the winter keeping your wall dry with the air barrier. So my feeling is the air barrier has precedence and deal with the heat in another way. We saw it last week in that insulation film from this old house where they had that barrier that let, what did it do? They used it in hot and cold climates. It was a little bit permeable. So that's another option for if you live in a hot, cold area. But somewhere this film this guy sent me, and Matt's guilty of this too. Matt Rissinger, in the film we saw last week where he had that green sheathing that had insulation as part of it. Remember that? The whole outside of the house was green. You remember that picture? And then he taped the edges. So it was each individual 4x8 sheet was an air barrier and an insulation. And then where the air would get in between them, they had this tape that he put down. But now you've got an air barrier on the outside. So if you've got moist air from the inside that goes in, it's not going to be able to get out. And so it's going to eventually condense inside the wall. So maybe he's putting air barriers on both sides. And I'm not sure what that does. That was never done in the past. They're experimenting with it now. So I'll look into that and see, because this guy that I got a video from recently said the same thing. He said doing both sides of the wall. I don't know. If for any reason you got moisture in there, it couldn't escape. So you've got to be pretty clear that you're not going to get anything in that wall. But again, plastic doesn't stop vapor. It just slows it way down. So even if a little bit got in there, it might cause some damage. So I don't know what the score is on that new, on sealing both sides or that plastic that's permeable. Those are kind of new ideas, and I don't think they're settled yet. But any place that's cold and doesn't get totally hot in the summer, most places that are cold they get warm days, but they're not blistering. But there are occasional places that are just, miserably hot in the summer and miserably cold in the winter. Not a great place to live, but. So
is the plastic under slabs permeable, like to prevent the cracking in the slabs?
It's, like I said, they're all a little permeable, but not very much. And they put pretty thick stuff under there because they're pouring stuff on it often. And it's usually 10 mil. And that's pretty, and if it's taped, that's a pretty good vapor barrier, because the concrete, concrete is porous and water will wick up through concrete. So if you have floor just on concrete in an area that's, that's wet, where the ground gets wet, and water gets under your slab, it'll go up through and then get the floor wet. So they only put plastic on slabs up north in the old days, just like they put plastic on the walls. That was something they discovered first where it gets cold, but now they're starting to do it everywhere. I don't know if it's required in Santa Barbara yet.
No, it
If
is.
it is?
Yeah, it's sand and then plastic and then sand.
Okay. 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 So there you go. Oh, but yeah. Okay.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So you said the visqueen or the bitcha thing goes on the inside or the inside the drywall?
Yeah, it's not bitches thing. That's a tar product, but I was talking to them in the same paragraph, but they're different. So the visqueen or the plastic polyethylene, that's what that plastic is. It goes on the wall. It's stapled right on the studs. First the insulation's put in, then the plastic staple on the studs, then the drywall or plaster is put over that.
Gotcha. Okay, that makes more sense. I was more
Yeah, so
confused.
that's in the north. In the south, where it doesn't get that cold, but they're really sweltering hot, and they don't want the hot air to get in, they'll put the visqueen on the outside.
Gotcha.
And I don't know what happens. They don't put on the inside the vapor from the house. Houses always have vapor. It's going to come into the wall, and I don't know what's going to happen to that. I'll look into that and try to figure it out. The northern climate, where it's not so hot in the summer, we're pretty established with the airtight, vapor-tight plastic vapor barrier in the inside between the studs and the sheetrock. That's kind of established already. But we've realized that those in-between climates that have both, we're having to deal with those now. But it was interesting, that old brick house in that movie didn't have any insulation because it was built in the 30s. And so the guy said, well, there's nothing we can do about that, in a reasonable cost. But if we make it so tight that the hot air can't get out convectionally, it'll conduct through the wall faster than if there were insulation. But they're hoping that if there's no leaks, that at least a lot of that air will stay in the area. And I'm sure there's truth to that. It's the next best thing because, it's really costly. Those old brick places are really hard to, sometimes a brick is a veneer. They do a stud wall and then they have brick on the outside, but that one was brick. The wall was brick. So that's a problem. Any other questions? What's next week? I didn't get a, discussion topic up last week. I'm sorry, I spaced out. I got busy. I'll do one tomorrow, and I'll have this. I did get the recording for last week. So let me go to Canvas real quick and just to see if there's anything I need to prep you guys with.
For the discussion questions, can I just write it down on paper and then send you a picture of it?
Absolutely.
Okay, cool.
Well, yeah. So
Patrick,
module.
did you take roll?
Hold on. Wait, what's that?
Did you take roll?
No, I'll do that. Hold on. So you can see my canvas now, right?
Yes.
So today was shell sealing. Oh, okay. So next week's ventilation. So we'll kind of continue this indoor air quality. And so don't forget on the assignment, there's, oh my God, there's no handouts. No, that can't be right. I'll post some. I've got some things I want you to look at. How weird is that? Okay, I'll post some. I'll post some tomorrow. So go if you wait a day to do your reading for next week, okay? But ventilation, we'll talk about the air changes per hour. And oh, that's so weird. I know there's, it somehow didn't register. I know there's stuff. I know there's stuff to read, so I'll put it on there. Something happened. Okay, let's kill that. So roll. Miguel. Jesus.
Here.
Alec. Lewis.
Present.
Jack.
Vicente.
Okay. ADR.
I'm here.
Yeah. Zach.
Here.
Eric Mendez. Dylan Mitchell.
Here.
Joel Santos.
Here.
Michael Silva's here. Jose Silva, you're here, right?
Here.
Yeah, you're always here. It's good. John Tapia.
Here.
Okay, great. Okay, you guys, check back in a couple of days a couple of days for the assignment. There's a few things I can see them in my mind, so somehow that I skipped that. So I'll post them for you. And I'll post a question tomorrow for the discussion too. Okay. Any more questions? Should I let you go? Have a night. I get my COVID booster tomorrow.
Are you serious?
Yeah. I'm 65. I'm over 65.
They're coming out with the boosters already?
For old people and people with immune vulnerabilities.
Which shot did you get originally?
Pfizer. That's the only one that I just lucked out. That was the one I was nearest to get, and it's also the first one with a booster.
Huh. Okay.
What's a booster?
The third shot, because they found that the immunity weakens after time.
Is that like a chaser after the shot?
What?
Is that like a chaser after the shot?
Yeah. Well, it's all new. I mean, they took a long time to okay them just to make sure they were safe, but they still don't know everything about them. So, they were hoping they would last a little longer, but they've some of the country, Israel, I think, has been ahead in the testing, and they said that some of the efficacy wanes after 6 months. So, young people, it's not so serious for the booster, although you follow what your doctor says. But for old people and older people and sick people, it's worth doing because you don't want to get sick. Okay, everybody. Oh, so yeah. So Dylan.
Yeah.
I'll send you an email about the bathroom, okay?
Okay.
Directions and stuff. Thanks.
Yeah.
All right, you guys. I will see you next.
See you, Patrick.
Okay, see you Monday. All right, adios.
Thanks.
Yep.
Patrick, I'm gonna turn in the discussion question that I haven't done yet. I'm gonna send you a picture in like 30 minutes, probably.
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine.
Okay,
or
cool.
even tomorrow. I know some people get busy and they have to delay. That's okay. All right.
Okay, have a good night.